Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 22. Darcy and Clint. After she'd managed to chase Eric and Jane out of their lab, with Thor's help, Darcy stopped briefly to get herself something to eat and relax, and contemplate the last few days. Last year, she'd made a point of reading the Eddas. It hadn't exactly been her cuppa, but in the face of Thor being real, she figured any information was better than none at all. She'd come away from that reading with the very, very firm belief that Odin was a right bastard of the First Order, and that it was no small wonder Loki had gone over the deep edge. She'd also hoped, with everything in her, that most of it hadn't happened. She was sure as could be that Thor never would have been party to some of the crap it had claimed he did to Loki, given how much he cared about Loki, but that didn't mean that someone else hadn't been the one to do it. And worst part was, she was probably never going to know if any of it was the truth, because, like hell, she was asking. Because, really, there was just no way to ask, did you really give birth to a horse? And not mortally offend the person, even if it was true. And really, that was, if anything, the least crazy thing on the list. So really, she'd been primed to give Odin a piece of her mind, even before she'd met him, and he'd been acting all superior and self-righteous and smarmy. Gah! Definitely a rat bastard. What Frigga saw in him, she'd never know. Maybe she hadn't had a choice. It would make sense if it had been some sort of arranged marriage, given Odin's status and the fact that women seem to be just shy of second-class citizens in Asgard. At least Thor realized now that things had been a little messed up where Loki was concerned, and was determined to at least try to make things right. She wished him luck, because he was right. Loki had been through some heavy stuff, and there was going to be a meltdown sooner rather than later. At least Loki would be here for it, and not in Asgard, where everyone would probably not only ignore his distress, but blame him for everything. Darcy gave her head a shake. Jarvis, what time is it? She asked. It is 2 a.m., Miss Lewis, Jarvis informed her. Darcy scowled. And how many of the Geek Squad are still in their lairs? She wanted to know. Sir, Captain Rogers, and Mr. Ferguson are all in Sir's main lab. Dr. Banner and Dr. Ross are in their lab, but Dr. Ross has begun shutting down for the day and is ensuring Dr. Banner joins her. Good on her. I'll go roust the boys out of Stark's lab, though what Rogers is doing down there, I don't know. I believe Captain Rogers went down to Sir's lab in order to get to know Sir better. He was provided with not precisely erroneous information, but certainly biased, and was endeavouring to find out the truth, Jarvis told her. Sir has spent most of the day teaching Captain Rogers how to work the holographic interface Sir uses when designing, and debating options for upgrades to a new suit with him. Mr. Ferguson arrived a few hours ago and joined in the debate. In other words, they're going to need prying out of there, or they'll never leave because they're having way too much fun, Darcy said. That would be a correct and succinct summation of the situation, Jarvis agreed. Darcy started an amusement. What is it with geeks and playing with new toys? She wondered aloud, then headed for the elevator. The door straight ahead, Miss Lewis, Jarvis told her. Darcy walked in and had to laugh. Stark had evidently started teaching both Rogers and Loki how to work the design program, because they were both mucking about with what looked like holographic versions of Stark's suits. Stark himself was working on a third suit while also keeping an eye on the other two. What on earth are you three up to in here? She asked. Sparky! How'd you get down here? Stark wanted to know. Darcy blinked at the nickname, but decided it was fitting. Looking for you three. Do you realize what time it is? She asked. Stark shrugged. Don't know, don't care. Busy doing science here. He flapped a hand at her as if trying to dismiss her, which, of course, she completely ignored. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's 2 a.m. You guys can come back to this in the morning. Didn't anyone ever tell you that it's a spectacularly bad idea to engineer on a sleep? Explosions happen that way, Darcy said. Rogers seemed willing enough to call it a night. 2 in the morning? Gosh, I had no idea so much time had passed. He glanced up. Thanks, Jarvis. You can shut this down now. Indeed, Captain Rogers, Jarvis said, and the hologram Rogers had been playing with faded out. One down, two to go. Okay, you two, hit save and shut her down for the night and go get some sleep. You're going to thank me later. She started nudging at Stark, poking him in the shoulder and arm to annoy him into moving. Stark scowled at her for a moment, then huffed. I suppose, he pouted. Jarvis, shut it down. Come on, reindeer games. We can pick this back up in a few hours. I don't think challenging her is the best idea. That actually made Loki laugh and leave the station he'd been working on. Indeed, if we do not do as she bids, she may wield her taser against us. I still wish she could have tased Odin, Tony said, like she wasn't standing right there. Darcy laughed. That makes two of us, Stark. Now get a move on. You can play more after you've slept at least 4 hours. And a decent breakfast. Slave driver, Stark whined, even as he headed into the elevator with the others. Clint could not believe Stark. He'd spent over an hour poking into every nook and cranny on the floor. Entire floor that was his apartment. Stark had spared no expense. Clint had a flat screen TV bigger than he was, a top-of-the-line stereo system, and a tub that qualified as a pool, among other amenities. The bed alone was worth the price of admission. The catwalk and platforms were accessible via a number of spots where the walls sported convenient knobs to allow for climbing, and Clint swiftly discovered that the catwalks and platforms allowed for an unobstructed view of the entire apartment. Clint could even get from room to room on the catwalks without having to get down. There were holes through the bedroom and bathroom walls where he could crawl through on the catwalks. After a thorough and delighted perusal of the room he'd been given, Clint had gone back out into the city to help with the cleanup and recovery. But after 2 days without being able to shoot something, and wanting very, very badly to shoot Odin, Clint decided he would check out Tony's special shooting range. The only reason he hadn't checked it out when they'd got back had been because he knew himself well enough to know that if it was any kind of awesome, Phil would need some high explosives to get him back out of there. And given the place had been built by Tony Stark, Clint was betting on it being awesome. He grabbed his bow and quiver and headed off. His first clue that he hadn't completely underestimated Tony came when he got off the elevator in the sub-basement and was faced with a seriously heavy-duty steel door. The sort designed to survive blasts at close range. There was a computerized door lock beside it, a clear indication that Jarvis was in charge of making sure no one walked in unexpectedly, and that no one that had no business being in there got in there. The door swung open easily when he approached, and Clint stepped inside only to stop and stare. The place was as unlike a shooting range as it was possible to get. The typical shotgun range was about 2/10 of a mile long, give or take a bit. This? Somehow, and like heck, Clint could figure out how Tony managed it, but this took to be double that, nearly half a mile long. It was also about 50 feet tall and over 100 feet wide. But that wasn't the end of it, because there were platforms and perches of varying sizes everywhere. From literally only an inch off the floor to so close to the ceiling he'd have to lie flat on his stomach to fit. And they were made of or covered in various surfaces, from smooth metal to wood to gravel and even carpeting. There were also ropes, bars, catwalks, and other things scattered all over the place to allow him to get from one perch to another via a number of the means he usually used to do so in the field, as well as provide obstacles for him to shoot around. The only thing there wasn't was targets. Jarvis, I'm assuming you have access in here, Clint said aloud. So, where are the targets? Sir has prepared a number of different kinds of targets for you, Agent Barton. You will find them to your right, Jarvis told him, and a panel that had until that moment looked like just another bit of wall popped forward and slid aside. Inside the closet, or whatever, was a veritable army of targeting dummies. Some of them looked like the sort you just leaned against a wall and shot at, but most of them had electronic components that made Clint suspect that either they had some sort of onboard computer that would move them in pre-programmed ways, or Jarvis could control them. Clint grinned toothily. That could prove to be a heck of a challenge. But in a rack near the door was a whole bunch of things that Clint got one real good look at and started laughing uncontrollably because they looked remarkably like the little floating ball drone that Luke faced off against briefly in the first Star Wars movie. When Clint managed to calm down enough to talk, he shook his head. Jarvis told Tony he has watched way see the heck too many movies, he said. And then tell me if those things can shoot back. I will do so, Jarvis said, sounding distinctly amused. And they do indeed shoot back, though their shots are not strong enough to do more than sting. Just do me one more favor, Jarvis, Clint said, and warn me if Stark has or is about to manage building a functional lightsaber. I will do so. Miss Potts has expressed a similar desire to be forewarned in such an event, and I must admit, it would seem prudent, Jarvis told him. Would you like to put the range through its paces? Hell yes, Jarvis, Clint said and hurried out to the closest of a nearby perch. Bring it on! 2 hours later, it was sweaty. His entire body was quivering from the effort of shooting and swinging and flinging himself all over the room, and he was riding the sort of adrenaline I only very rarely managed to get. He had blown through his quiver of arrows so many times he lost count, and he loved it. This was better than sex. Clint lay on the last platform he'd used, limp and unmoving for a few moments, catching his breath. Okay, Jarvis, put it away. I'll be back down here tomorrow, probably. Like he could stay away from this? Ha! He peeled himself off the platform and made his way out of the range. He stopped on his floor long enough to take a shower and change clothes, then grabbed a protein bar to tide him over until lunch. Who all's in the tower today, Jarvis? He asked. Everyone has elected to take the day off from rescue work, Agent Barton. Sir and Mr. Ferguson are in Sir's main lab. Doctors Banner and Ross are in their lab, and Doctors Foster, Selvig, Thor, and Miss Lewis are in theirs. Miss Potts is in her office, and Agent Coulson and Romanov are on the 4th floor. Oh, excellent, Clint said and headed for the elevator. 4th floor, please. Of course, Agent Barton. It didn't take him long to spot Phil and Nat. They were at the center of a conspicuously clear area in what was otherwise a sea of semi-organized chaos. Clint suppressed a laugh and headed over. Nat caught sight of him first and gave him a small smile. Well, you have the look of someone who just had way too much fun, she noted. Shooting range, Clint said. That made even her eyebrows raise. That good? Phil asked. Better! You two have to check it out sometime. I can spend all day down there. Phil gave him a distinctly amused look. Try it and I'll have Jarvis lock you out. Living in a shooting range is not healthy. Clint mock pouted. You never let me have any fun, he accused. That is perhaps because your idea of fun does not tally with everyone else's, Phil said, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But I am pleased. You like it so much. Clint grinned. It's a sniper's paradise in there. And someone, here he gave Phil a significant look, must have told him about my habits because it's literally perfect for me. Phil managed to pretend innocence thanks to his ability to keep a straight face, but Clint knew better. Well, we were about to head up for some lunch. Care to join us? Phil asked. Sounds like a plan! The three of them piled into the elevator. My floor, if you please, Jarvis, Phil said. Clint's naked. I love the color theme, sir, he said. Phil gave him the sort of serene look that actually boded ill for the person it was bestowed on. I'm sure you do, Agent Barton. They headed into Phil's kitchen and began preparing themselves a lunch, moving around each other with unconscious ease, each of them automatically taking up certain chores and putting out ingredients and spices without any need for discussion. Once lunch was ready, they piled their plates. Are we agreed, then? Phil asked. Neither Clint nor Natasha mistook what he was asking. S.H.I.E.L.D. was no longer a factor, for which Clint would be eternally grateful. That still left them with a choice. They could stay with the Avengers or go their own way. Clint had little doubt that if that was their decision, Tony would let them go without any of the problems they would have incurred trying to walk away from S.H.I.E.L.D. Not that it was much of a choice between the two, because even if you ignored any other factor, saving the world was sort of a hard gig to match. Anything else would be a heck of a come down at this point. That they had co-workers they could at least tolerate, and in many cases, actively like, was just the icing on the cake. Yep, Clint said. Natasha nodded her agreement. Besides, this thing with Thanos isn't over, I'm betting. You're not the only one thinking that, Phil agreed. We will need all the firepower we can get our hands on to win that particular fight. Good thing Tony's in good with the X-Men. That'll help a lot, Clint said. Agreed, Phil said. Though we should perhaps look at trying to network with other hero types. See if any of them are amenable to working for a common cause.